Picture this. It's May 31st, 1916. In the cold waters of the North Sea, the two most powerful navies on the entire planet are about to collide. This was the Battle of Jutland, the single largest naval battle of the First World War. It was a brutal, chaotic slugfest that, believe it or not, over a century later, we're still arguing about.
Okay, so let's get right into the heart of this mystery. On one hand, you have the British. They lost more ships, a lot more tonnage, and more than double the number of sailors. I mean, if you just look at the scorecard, it seems like a pretty clear win for Germany. But, it's never that simple, is it? And that's the central puzzle we're going to unravel today.
To really understand what happened, you first have to get your head around the sheer scale of this thing. We're talking about 250 warships maneuvering across a huge stretch of the North Sea. This wasn't just a battle, it was basically a floating city made of steel and cannons, all trying to destroy each other.
So you gotta ask, how did we get here? How did these two absolute titans of the sea end up on this collision course? Well, it all came down to a massive, high-stakes gamble, with both sides desperately hoping to land a knockout blow.
Well, you see, the two sides came into this with totally different game plans. Germany, with its smaller high-seas fleet, knew it couldn't win a straight-up brawl. So their plan was actually pretty clever, a trap. Use a small force to lure a piece of the huge British fleet toward their main battle line, and then crush it. The British plan? Way simpler. Keep their crippling blockade on Germany, and if the German fleet ever dared to come out and play, find it and completely annihilate it.
And the men in charge had completely different ways of thinking. For the British, you had Admiral Jellicoe. He was careful, cautious, and he knew he was the man who could lose the war in an afternoon. On the German side was Admiral Scheer, who was aggressive, a risk-taker, and just itching for a fight.
All right, let's get into the action. The first act of this incredible drama, and you know what? At first, the German plan worked absolutely perfectly.
So, the Germans dangled some bait, a scouting force of 5 fast battlecruisers under the very skilled Admiral Hipper. And the British, led by the dashing Vice Admiral David Beatty, took that bait hook, line, and sinker. Hipper turned south, and Beatty, always eager for a scrap, gave chase, leading his ships right toward the entire hidden German fleet. This whole phase became famously known as the Run to the South.
And wow, the results of this chase were just immediate and totally catastrophic for the British. In the very first exchange, they lost this many of their magnificent state-of-the-art battlecruisers. 2 of them, gone. And what you're seeing here, it's just terrifying. The German gunnery was incredibly accurate. Shells slammed into the British ships, the Indefatigable and the Queen Mary, and hit their ammunition stores. They didn't just sink, they literally vaporized in these enormous explosions, taking almost everyone on board with them. Turns out, there was a fatal flaw in how the British handled their ammunition and in their armor design, and it made them shockingly vulnerable.
So Beatty sees his second massive ship just vanish. And he turns to his flag captain and says what has to be one of the most famous understatements in all of military history. This quote just perfectly captures the absolute shock and disbelief on the British side as their supposedly invincible ships were just being ripped apart.
Okay, so it looks like it's all going Germany's way, right? The trap is about to snap shut. But then, in a heartbeat, the entire battle gets flipped on its head. All of a sudden, British scouts spot the main German fleet looming on the horizon. Beatty realizes he hasn't been the hunter. He's been the one walking into an ambush. And just like that, the roles were completely reversed. Beatty immediately spins his ships around 180 degrees, and now we have the run to the north. And guess what? He's the lure now. The entire German fleet, thinking they're about to finish him off, is now charging headfirst into the biggest naval trap in history. Admiral Jellicoe's 150-ship Grand Fleet. And this is the main event. The moment everyone had been waiting for since the war kicked off. The full-scale, no-holds-barred collision of the world's 2 greatest dreadnought fleets. I mean, just look at these numbers. Jellicoe had 28 of the biggest battleships, dreadnoughts, to Scheer's 16. The British had them totally outgunned, with almost double the firepower. In a straight-up fight, the odds were just overwhelmingly in their favor. The German gamble had completely backfired. So as the Germans pop out of the mist, Jellicoe pulls off this classic textbook naval move called crossing the T.
Basically, he lines up his entire fleet in one long line right across the Germans' path. This meant every single one of his battleships could fire all their main guns, while the Germans could only shoot back with the few guns on their front ships. It was a tactically perfect position, potentially annihilating.
This was it. This should have been checkmate, the end of the German fleet. But you have to give it to Admiral Scheer. He was a brilliant tactician. Staring at total destruction, he ordered a maneuver that nobody thought was even possible. A simultaneous 180-degree turn by his entire fleet, all at once, in perfect unison.
And in all the smoke and the fading daylight, the German fleet just disappeared, vanished. Jellicoe, worried about torpedo attacks in the dark and the terrible visibility, decided not to chase them down aggressively. And somehow, under the cover of night, Scheer's fleet managed to outmaneuver the British and escape all the way back home. The decisive, glorious victory the British public wanted, it had slipped right through their fingers. Okay, so after all that chaos, all that bloodshed, all that brilliant maneuvering, the smoke clears and the guns fall silent. Let's get back to our big question. Who actually won? Let's look at the raw numbers, the tactical scorecard. The British lost 14 ships and over 6,000 men. The Germans, 11 ships and about 2,500 men. Based on these numbers alone, you can see why the Germans got home and celebrated a huge victory. They'd hit the enemy harder than they'd been hit. So, a clear German win? Case closed? Well, not so fast. A battle isn't just about the numbers on a scoreboard. It's about what you were trying to achieve. It's all about strategy. And this is the kicker. You have to look at the bigger picture. What was Germany's goal? To break the British blockade. Did they do it? Nope. That blockade stayed locked down tight, slowly strangling Germany's war effort. And the German fleet? It was so battered it never again came out in force to challenge the British. The Royal Navy still controlled the North Sea. So when you look at it that way, strategically, the British had won. So you're left with this fascinating legacy. Jutland was the only time these massive dreadnought fleets ever really went toe-to-toe. But it also hinted at the future. Germany's switch to submarines and later the rise of air power showed that the whole era of the battleship being the undisputed queen of the seas, well, that might just be coming to an end. It was both a spectacular climax and just maybe the beginning of the end.